In this video, I would like to speak about some of the basic concepts behind trading the FLD. I'm not going to be delving into the details of what a long trade is and what a short trade is. I am going to assume that you understand some basics of trading itself. If you don't understand the difference between a long trade and a short trade and how to set an entry and what a stop loss level is and so forth, I would encourage you to read about that before you come back to this video to understand how we apply the FLD to our trading. So what's the first thing to bear in mind? Of course, we are trading the cycles in the market. And so the first thing you will need to do is to choose a time frame that you will be trading. And we'll be discussing that in more detail in a later video. This time frame is the 1 hour time frame, but it actually doesn't matter what time frame you're looking at. Each time frame does have its peculiarities. Of course, you are going to be looking at different cycles on each time frame, but the sentient FLD indicator has been set up in such a way that we have a signal cycle FLD on each and every time frame, and that signal cycle is specifically tuned to that time frame so that it gives you a similar trading experience no matter what time frame you are on. Of course, on shorter time frames you're going to experience more volatility, particularly around news events and market opening and closing and so forth. But the basic concepts that I'm speaking about in this video will apply to any time frame. So what is the first thing that we are trying to do? In order to trade our cycles, we are expecting an M shape to occur in the market, as you will know from our discussions of the basic Hurst Cycles concepts. Each and every cycle is forming M shapes. Sometimes they are perfect, sometimes they are less than perfect, but we will be trying to identify those M shapes on our chart. Now, the important thing is that on each time frame, we are looking at a signal cycle FLD. It is called the signal cycle FLD because it provides us with the signals to enter trades. We also know that we have a full sequence of interactions between price and the signal cycle FLD, which are labeled from A to H. And that full sequence of interactions plays out between one sequence cycle trough, such as we see on this chart over here, and the next sequence cycle trough. Here we have not yet in fact formed that trough. You can see here we have a rather spread out nest of lows, indicating that we are of course expecting the next sequence cycle trough to form, and as a matter of interest that trough is expected to be synchronous with the next two longer cycles on this chart. In other words, at the moment we are looking at price coming into a yellow cycle trough. The yellow cycle is of course the 20-day cycle trough. But in terms of our trading, we don't worry too much about the yellow and the pale blue cycles. We are focused on trading a sequence of interactions between one sequence cycle trough and the next. When I say we don't pay much attention to the yellow and the blue cycles, that's not really entirely correct. Let me rephrase that. We're not too bothered about where those troughs are, except for the fact that they will influence the underlying trend of the cycle that we are trading. In other words, is this going to be a bullish or a bearish cycle? And I should point out that, of course, if we are coming into a 20-day cycle trough, which of course still lies ahead of us, it probably hasn't formed yet, then because this is going to be a big cycle trough that's forming here, I'm drawing lots of arrows to indicate that, we would of course expect this M shape to be a bearish M shape. I hope that that makes sense. If this yellow cycle trough, and let me just remove those markings, if this yellow cycle trough in fact occurred over here, and you can see it is possible because here we have an extended whisker showing that it is possible that that trough did occur there, then we would expect this to be a bullish M shape. I think that is fairly obvious. Following a trough of the yellow cycle, we would expect first of all a bullish M shape. Then of course we will encounter a fairly neutral M shape into the blue cycle trough. And then effectively we get a mirror reflection of that. Let me draw that backwards if you like. Coming into the yellow trough we would expect a bearish M shape. There you can see the bearish M shape. And then of course we would have a fairly neutral M shape. And here is the previous blue cycle trough. I hope that the way that these cycles are fitting together is beginning to make sense to you and that you understand that part of the process. So to get back to the basics of trading the FLD, we are looking for a sequence cycle trough. That is where we begin to identify trading opportunities. Our trading opportunities, or the sequence of trading opportunities that we will encounter over a full cycle, start with a sequence cycle trough forming. Of course, this could have been a longer than sequence cycle trough. As I've just mentioned, it could have also been a trough of the blue cycle, the 10-day cycle, and also the yellow cycle, the 20-day cycle. The important thing is that we first of all identify the position or the anticipated position of a sequence cycle trough. And of course, we have another one on this chart lying ahead of us. There is the nest of lows for the next sequence cycle trough. That is where we will start identifying the next sequence of trading opportunities. I speak about trading opportunities as opposed to simply speaking about trades. That is because we first need to identify an opportunity to enter a trade, and then we enter the trade. So what do I mean by an opportunity to enter a trade? Well, because we are trading a sequence of interactions between price and the FLD, the opportunity to make a trade forms when we are expecting or anticipating a trough to form in the market. Of course, here we are looking back with the benefit of hindsight, but in later videos in this series, we're going to step through the price action bar by bar. The important thing is that you first of all understand the concept that we are expecting a sequence cycle trough to form. At that point, we are looking at our signal cycle FLD to provide us with the signals. So, our opportunities are identified by the sequence of interactions between price and the FLD. So what is our first possible trading opportunity? It is, of course, an A category interaction. And here on this chart, I am displaying past interactions, both in terms of the symbols. You can see the crossing point over there, and also the A category symbol. That would have been our first trading opportunity. And so following a trough of at least sequence cycle magnitude, our first trading opportunity is our A category trading opportunity. It is a long trading opportunity. We're going to speak in later videos about how that opportunity becomes an actual trade in terms of acting upon the price interaction with your signal cycle FLD. We're not discussing that in this video. For now, we're just filling in the broader strokes of the basic ideas behind trading the FLD. Now, you'll notice that in this particular example, that A category interaction was a little bit disappointing. It probably did turn out to be a profitable trade, but it was a fairly disappointing one. And the reason for that is because of something else that you have got to remain constantly aware of if you are trading intraday charts. And that has to do with when the different markets are opening and closing. I spoke in an earlier video about the nature of price action. And so in considering this particular A category interaction, we need to know when it occurred. As a matter of interest, it occurred in about the middle of the London session. This is the Nasdaq that we're looking at. And so the London session is not completely dormant. There are people trading the Nasdaq, but the price movements are generally more muted than they are during the New York session. As a matter of interest, can you spot the bar where the New York market opened? It is, of course, this bar over here. Let me clear these drawings, they're getting a bit confusing. This bar over here is the bar on which the New York session opened. Notice the particular price action that I referred to in the nature of price action video. There you can see price reaching down, just exceeding this low point over here in the first bar of the New York session. What was happening in terms of our interactions with the FLD? The interesting thing is that having experienced an A category price cross over the FLD, the next thing we were expecting was a BC category interaction, which you can see over there, where the FLD is expected to provide support. Notice those upward pointing arrows because of the fact that price did find approximate support at the level of the FLD. That brings us to our second trading opportunity in this sequence. That opportunity is a BC category interaction, or more correctly speaking, it is a C category trade. It is also a long trade. The idea behind a BC category interaction and a C category trade is that when you see evidence that price is finding support at the level of the FLD, and it's important that you must see that evidence. It is possible sometimes that price will just cross down below the FLD. If that's the case, then you've not seen evidence of support. When you see evidence of support at the level of the FLD, you could then enter into your C category long trade to benefit from that move up to the first peak. Of course, in this particular example, that move up was a particularly good and profitable one. What about where you would exit from these trades? Your exits are going to be determined according to your own personal strategy, but I should point out that we have our very useful targets. I am purposefully not displaying them on this chart because I didn't want to get distracted by those kinds of details. But the important thing is that you will use your targets, and also the targets from longer time frames, all the targets that we've been looking at, you will use to set your take profit exits and to tighten your stops. We're going to be speaking about all of that in the videos to come. The next interaction between price and the FLD is the D category interaction. There it is marked on this chart, although it's hardly legible, but that is our D category interaction. What is price doing in terms of the cycle analysis at that time? It is, of course, moving down into our mid-cycle trough, which is the orange-colored cycle trough over here, and so that is exactly what happened over there. Now, our third possible trading opportunity is a D category short trade. In other words, we could go short when price crosses down below the signal cycle FLD in a D category interaction. I've mentioned before that these D category interactions often result in trades that you have to be very nimble about getting out of, because price will usually achieve the target and then bounce up again. Initially, my recommendation is that you avoid taking D category short trades. And the reason for that is because they are fairly tricky, and you need to have really understood the process before you start trading your D category short trades. Of course, it depends very much on the time frame that you're trading, and I must remind you again that we have to bear in mind time. Time is critically important when trading cycles. What was the time on this chart? I actually think you can't quite see it. I think it's cut off below the video, but that was, let me just actually bring it up into the frame. That was 1 o'clock in the morning. There we go. So that was 1 o'clock in the morning where we were forming that 2-day cycle trough. Of course, overnight the markets do go very quiet, so it's hardly surprising that this D category short trade didn't really fulfill its promise. This entry, and in fact I should point out that the 1 o'clock mark on MT4 was about over here. So our entry would have been at about 1 o'clock in the morning. This was about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning that the trough formed. And so 1 o'clock in the morning, you are unlikely to be entering into a short trade on the NASDAQ. I would just like to point that out. And so that was certainly a disappointing D category short trade. What's our next interaction? It is, of course, an E category interaction, and our E category trade is a long trading opportunity. Now, the E category long trading opportunity is also usually one that you have to be fairly nimble about getting out of, as I have pointed out, because price is rising up to the second peak of the M shape. If this is going to turn out to be a bearish cycle, and bear in mind that at this time we were looking at the sequence cycle trough over here, and the yellow or 20-day cycle trough still looming ahead of us, therefore we were expecting this to be a bearish M shape. Very important to bear in mind. Is this expected to be a bullish or a bearish M shape that we are busy trading? If it's expected to be a bearish one, then this E category long trade might prove to be profitable, but you need to be careful about getting out of it fairly quickly. And in fact, as you can see, here is the E category interaction, or the signal from the signal cycle. Notice the time on this chart again. I think that was probably the opening bar of the New York session when the traders in New York were just finishing their coffee and getting involved in the markets, and that's why we saw this spike down. It's a very subtle little spike down to the FLD as a matter of interest, and then it bounced straight back up again. But it did give us a profitable long E category trading opportunity. We had to be pretty quick about getting out. If we were trading this 1 hour chart, we probably would have been tightening stops all the way up here in order to hold on to our profits. And so the D category and the E category trades are fairly advanced trades, if you like. When you're getting started, you should be focusing on your A category. Let me just complete this list over here. Your A category long trade is likely to be your most profitable trade. Your B and C category long trade can also be a very profitable trade, but of course you need to wait for signs of support developing. Now let's look at the next trade, which of course is our F category trade. That is based upon price crossing down below the FLD in the F category interaction. So the F category trade is a short trade. The F category trade is usually a very good profitable one. And so initially I would expect that you will be focusing on your A category long trade and your F category short trade. Those are the two trades I would recommend you focus on initially. Try to catch those trades and make the most of those opportunities. Here is the F category trade. In fact, the symbol itself is hidden beneath those arrows. Unfortunately, we can't see it, but that is the F category short trading opportunity there. Notice what happened in this particular example. Price crossed down below the FLD, had not yet reached its target. We can estimate that target as being somewhere down here. It did not reach that target straight away, but immediately bounced back up to the FLD. That is our G and H category interaction where price found resistance. So our final opportunity is provided by that GH category interaction, which provides us the opportunity for an H category short trade. Of course, we don't trade the G category as such because we're not looking at going long as price comes back up to the FLD. Although I do know some advanced FLD traders who do that. They catch that move back up to the FLD. But certainly initially, you're going to be trading the H category short trade for this final move down into the next sequence cycle trough. Now, the reason I recommend that you focus on the F category short trade as opposed to the H category short trade, for instance, is because very often the F category short trade morphs, if you like, into an H category short trade. Let me see if I can just erase some of these markings here. So, for instance, entering into this F category short trade over here as price crossed down below the FLD over here, you probably would have set your stop either at the top of that bar or maybe even right up here, although that's a fairly wide stop. And so when price came back to the FLD and found resistance at that level of the FLD, you would probably have stayed in your trade and possibly you would have added to your short position as you saw evidence that price was finding resistance at the level of the FLD, in which case, of course, the extra trades could have been called H category trades. But what often happens with an F category trade is that it starts off as an F category trade and it pretty much stays an F category trade all the way into the trough. So that is the basic idea behind trading the FLD. We have these 6 trading opportunities. Our A category long trading opportunity, our C category long trading opportunity on a BC category interaction on evidence that price is finding support at the level of the FLD. Then our D category short trade, our E category long trade. Both of these are fairly quick trades that you need to be nimble about. Then our F category short trade, and finally our H category short trade, again entered on evidence that price is finding resistance at the level of the FLD. And so that is the basic concept behind trading your FLD. You have 6 trading opportunities between one sequence cycle and the next sequence cycle. The sentient FLD indicator will perform the analysis for you. It will provide you with the expectation or the anticipation of a sequence cycle. Your task is to filter through what is often the messiness of the cycle analysis. We will be speaking about that in a future video. Cycle analysis is such that it is often a little bit messy as we approach the right-hand edge of our chart. That is inevitable. There is absolutely nothing we can do about that unless you happen to have a crystal ball that you can look into. And then with the assistance of the FLD indicator, you will identify your opportunities. In the next video, we're going to take a look at a different time frame chart, a 15-minute chart, and we're going to step through the basic ideas of going from an opportunity to actually entering the trade, monitoring it, and exiting it.